Okay, this one is called U.S. Border Pigs #2. I'm sure they're going to love me over this. A pig is a person in government who intends to breach the trust and perjure their oath. So who are these U.S. border pigs? Well, the Department of so-called Homeland Security is a subsidiary of the United States Secret Service. This is a FOIA request I did with them back a couple years ago, and this is what they came back with. Okay, so they're a subsidiary of the United States Secret Service. Wow, so what's the Secret Service? Well, the Department of Homeland Security and all its subsidiaries, that means the TSA, FEMA, Customs, Immigration, etc., are subsidiaries of the United States Secret Service. Well, the United States Secret Service is a subsidiary of the Treasury Department, and the Treasury Department is a subsidiary of the International Monetary Fund, and the IRS is an agency of the International Monetary Fund. Look it up. Anyways, the United States has not had a treasury since 1921. At 41 Stat, Chapter 214, which is the Act, it's actually an appropriations bill, page 654. The United States Department of the Treasury is now owned by the International Monetary Fund. As a matter of fact, it talks about it in that statute where they turn it over to the Federal Reserve. And the International Monetary Fund is a subsidiary of the World Bank. This is 41 Stat. Let me go back here. Yeah, 41 Stat, Chapter 214. Notice up at the top, 214, 1920. Okay, Congressional Record, 63rd Congress, page 654. And we're going to look at the highlighted part here. This is an appropriations bill. Notice above the highlighted part, it talks about for the rental of necessary quarters, $4,500,000, provided that not to exceed $49,500 of the foregoing sum shall be expended for rental quarters in the District of Columbia. Okay, so this is an appropriations bill. And the point I want to make there is that they're not supposed to be putting legislation in an appropriations bill, but that's what they did. Anyways, independent treasury. And it says on the left, it says Office of Assistant Treasurers. Let's go back up there. It's easier to read because the abolished. That's it. Abolished. Office of Assistant Treasurers abolished. In the left, the little notes. Secretaries to be discontinued. Okay. Termination of services of employees. Okay, so independent treasury, they're eliminating it right here. Okay, and it goes on and talks about the how the Federal Reserve is going to take over as the treasury. Okay, anyways, so the further information about the SS, the Nazi SS Knights of Cetus Sacrorum, Knights of the Holy See. Okay, this is all tied into the Roman cult, and they originally were headquartered in Berlin, and they moved to Washington D.C. in 1945. So guess who's doing that now? Okay, the Nazi SS, also known as SS, a shortened name for Knights of Holy See, is a Roman Catholic spiritual and military order first formed in 1933, based completely on the Jesuit order structure upon the signing of the Sacred Rite Concordat, specifically through the application of Articles 1, 12, 15, 21, and 33 of the Enaction Clause of the Secret Supplement of the Concordat between Nazi Germany and the Pope. So the United Nations, through the International Monetary Fund, issues Social Security numbers. Social Security number is the United Nations account number. It's all tied into the Roman cult. The UN is owned and operated by the Roman cult. The Department of the Treasury issues the SS5, not the Social Security Administration. The new SS5 forms do not state who or what publishes them. The earlier ones said that they're Department of Treasury forms. All Social Security checks come directly from the IMF and the UN, and it says on the front of the check. Isn't it amazing how all these terror alerts start coming out when there are no DHS funding bills before Congress? Yeah. when there are DHS funding bills coming before Congress. That's right. Yeah, exactly. Some people are saying the United Nations is going to invade. It already has. Okay. The UN, the UN is already here. It's called Homeland Security. Copies of these documents can be found in my private group at Yahoo called Administrating Your Public Servants. For a complete set of YouTube videos with private information shares, a DVD with over 50 searchable law dictionaries, and other books and forums, contact me privately at engineerwin@yahoo.com. Donations to support this work are appreciated. I prefer gold or silver coin, but as an extremely less desirable alternative, I can accept IOUs, Federal Reserve notes, PayPal gifts, checks, money orders, etc. Send me an email for particulars. So what these Satanists do, the U.S. border pigs, like all the other Satanists actually, is they screen out intelligent people in their hiring process for their pigs. And a good example is Jordan versus City of New London, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit case 91-9188. Robert Jordan had a master's degree and scored too high in their test. He was too smart. And so they refused to hire him, and he sued them and lost. I know several people who were not hired for these kinds of positions because they scored too high in the test. This is actually ABC News article online where it talks about it. As September 8, 2000, a man whose bid to become a police officer was rejected after he scored too high on an intelligence test has lost his appeal in his federal lawsuit against the city. Satanists in America. Mark Passio, a former Satanist priest, has a bunch of natural law videos and talks about the pillars of Satanism. And one of them is moral relativism. There's no absolute right or wrong. Truth is relative. It's whatever we make up today. And it's right or wrong is what we decide today. And tomorrow it'll be something else. Gee, that sounds like a court case. 2/3 of the people believe in moral relativism. 2/3 of the people are practicing Satanists. For other pillars of Satanism, which are forms of mind control, is order followers, okay? And that's the U.S. border pigs. They're responsible for all the atrocities in history. Order followers are responsible for all the atrocities in history. They just follow orders without thinking about whether it's a lawful order or not. They're willing slaves. Mark Passio's got some great videos. He goes through it, and he's really brilliant. So I recommend checking out his YouTube profile. That's at the bottom of the page, and check him out. Anyone who's wearing a military uniform is an agent of the Roman cult. And this is Article 10 of the Concordat of 1933. And remember, it was talking about that back here. Remember when we were talking about it? Oh, it doesn't talk about Article 10, but it talks about the Concordat of 1933 in here. Anyways, that's because the Satanists, the Roman, they don't wear a uniform. They wear a business suit. The wearing of clerical dress or religious habit on the part of lay folk is liable to the same penalty on the part of the state as the misuse of a military uniform. All so-called governments are bankrupt and owned and operated by the Roman cult. At common law, a sheriff would have a star only. At common law, there's no uniform. World War II war crimes tribunals, all of the Nazis claimed they were just following orders. Well, gee, that sounds like they were Satanists. They either suffered death by hanging or spent the rest of their life in jail. Some of them are still hunted to this day. Vietnam War, the My Lai massacre, they convicted of murder. Today, order followers are everywhere, especially at the borders. And they go and assault you with their U.S. citizen. They put it on their webpage. All U.S. citizens have to carry a passport. Creates a presumption that you're a U.S. citizen if you have a passport. The U.S. border pigs do everything they can to coerce you, intimidate you, and threaten you to give evidence that you're one of their U.S. citizen slaves. I've gone across the border without a passport. I know other people that have done the same thing, but they still harass you. And when you tell them you're a state citizen, they say, we don't recognize state citizens. This is the Border Pigs website, and it talks about all U.S. citizens, including children, must carry a passport. And so they're going to assault you if you don't have it. Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel. Don't forget to follow me on vid.me. There's a link to my channel on VidMe. Don't forget to follow me on Steemit, Sovereignty International. Don't forget to like this video. On YouTube, don't forget to click the bell next to the subscribe button so you're notified when there's a new upload. On vid.me, don't forget to upvote this video. Steemit, don't forget to vote and make your comments. And BitChute, I've got a profile on BitChute as well. YouTube is committing suicide. They're basically demonetizing everybody, and they're just committing suicide. So I'm looking for other places to put my videos. This is my front page of my channel, Sovereign Living. The bell, notice the subscribe button has been pushed because otherwise it'll be red. And then the bell, you have to click on the bell so that another pop-up will come up. And there's got a box in there you have to check, and you got to click OK to be notified of uploads. Anyways, this is Steam It. And the left arrow is where you do the upvotes. The middle arrow is the number of upvotes. And the right arrow is where you can make some comments. And this is also Steam It. The arrow is pointing at the profile. You click on the profile and a pop-up will come down and you can follow or unfollow someone. Anyways, so the U.S. border pigs breach the peace every day, millions of times. The reason for the initial detention, speeding and running a red light, are not a breach of the peace. Okay, if there's no breach of the peace, then it's an unlawful arrest. The stopping of an automobile by a highway patrol officer for inspection of a driver's license or for any other purpose where it's accomplished by the authority of the officer is an arrest. So they don't have authority to arrest you. Any restraint, however slight, upon another's liberty to come and go as one pleases constitutes an arrest. The border pigs assault you every day. Unless there's a breach of the peace or a common law felony, which is a breach of the peace, committed in front of the peace officer or a lawful court order, they have nothing to say to you. The principle that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property except by due process of law did not originate in the American system of constitutional law, but was contained in the Magna Carta, sometimes referred to as Chapter 9, confirmed on the 19th day of May, June 1215, declared, no freeman shall be taken in prison or seized or outlawed or exiled, any ways destroyed, nor shall we go upon him nor send upon him, but by the lawful judgment of his peers or the law of the land. It has even been said that the principle was known before Magna Carta and that it was originally designed to secure the subject against arbitrary action of the crown and to place him under the protection of the law. It is settled beyond question that this principle came from England to America as part of the common law and has been a fundamental rule in common law. When first adopted in Magna Carta, the phrase law of the land had reference to the common law and has been a fundamental rule of the common law. It is manifest it was not left to the legislative power to enact any process which might be devised. The due process article is a restraint on the legislative as well as the executive and judicial powers of government, and cannot be so construed as to leave Congress free to make any process due process of law by its mere will. That's U.S. Supreme Court. What is due process of law may be ascertained by an examination of those settled usages and modes and proceedings existing in the common and statute law of England before the immigration of our ancestors. The expressions due process of law and law of the land have the same meaning. The law intended by the Constitution is the common law that has come down to us from our forefathers as it existed and understood and administered when that instrument was framed and adopted. At common law, as a general rule, an arrest could not be made without warrant for an offense less than a felony, except for a breach of the peace. At common law, an arrest could not be made of a person charged with a misdemeanor except on warrant of a magistrate unless it involved a breach of the peace, in which case the offender might be arrested by any person present at its commission. Okay, so it's if the cop can, if there's a breach of the peace, anybody can arrest you. It doesn't even have to be a pig. Anyways, or a cop in that case, a peace officer actually in that case. It has already been decided that no arrest can be lawfully made without a warrant, except in cases existing at common law before our Constitution was adopted. In many of these cases, it seems to have been held that the authority of an officer to arrest for misdemeanor without warrant is limited to breaches of the peace or a phrase committed in his presence. At common law, arrests for misdemeanors are not permissible without a warrant, except for acts committed in the presence of the officer causing a breach of the peace. An illegal arrest is an assault and battery. The pigs assault people every day. The person so attempted to be restrained of his liberty has the same right to use force in defending himself as he would in repelling any other assault and battery. Each person has a right to resist an unlawful arrest. In such a case, the person attempting the arrest stands in the position of a wrongdoer and may be resisted by the use of force as in self-defense. One may come to the aid of another being unlawfully arrested, just as he may where one is being assaulted, molested, raped, or kidnapped. Thus, it is not an offense to liberate one from the unlawful custody of an officer, even though he may have submitted to such custody without resistance. Similarly, a person cannot be convicted of resisting a peace officer in the execution of his duty unless the officer was acting strictly within the limits of his powers and duty. If the officer makes an unlawful arrest, then there's a common law right to resist that arrest. Announcing a subscription-based YouTube channel called Sovereignty International. The recommended cost of the subscription is currently $1.99 because it avoids the advertising only. If you like my work, it can be a donation. The only power that these New World Order Satanists have over us is through fraud and deception, and my agenda is to expose it for all our benefit, but I can't fight all the battles. I'm currently publishing a video a week. Some people have had trouble finding the video, or the channel, and so the link to it's at the bottom. I have some of the exclusive content is Arlington Private Information Share, Land Deed Training, Estoppel Certificates Training, Foreclosure Estoppel Certificates Training, Corporate Denial Training, Toll Roads Notice and Demand Training, Invoice Training, Notice of Void Judgment Training, Revocation of Signature Training, and Third-Party Witness Training. And also there's Federal Habeas Corpus Training, Revocation of Voter Registration Training, and there's a couple videos about criminal complaint training. Some other training I'm thinking about doing is lawsuit training and other training if anybody's interested. All forms, files, and other instructions are available for free on my 2 private groups at Yahoo Groups and Google Groups. YouTube has notified me that they will be terminating all paid subscription channels on the 1st of December unless they get sued. All exclusive content will still be on vid.me, and you can buy a subscription there. The YouTube is committing suicide, and so they got 60 of my videos demonetized right now, although they're reviewing most of them, and probably about 80% of them after they review them, they're all of a sudden monetized, and I'm keeping track of it because I'm going to sue their butt because they're causing me injury. They're going demonetizing the things. The revenue has plummeted, and it's because YouTube is doing that. So they're going to get their butt sued. I'm building the case against the bastards. Anyways, this is the front page of my channel. The top arrow is pointing at the link. The bottom arrow is pointing, because people have had trouble finding it, the bottom arrow is pointing at the Start Free Trial. And the reason that is because the Start Free Trial, somebody sent me a $1.99 donation, and I didn't know whether it was a donation or whether it was they wanted me to sign them up. And I have absolutely no control over the subscribers. I can't even see all the subscribers. So if you want to sign up, you're going to have to click on the Start Free Trial button, but that's going to be a moot discussion here probably after the 1st of December. That's what YouTube wants to do, is they want to sabotage anybody that doesn't trumpet their party line. Anyways, the U.S. border pigs say they don't recognize state citizens, and so people of a state are entitled to all the rights which formerly belonged to the king by his prerogative. It will be admitted on all hands that with the exception of the powers granted to the states and the federal government through the constitutions, the people of the several states are unconditionally sovereign within their respective states. There is in our political system a government of each of the several states and the government of the United States. Each is distinct from the other and has citizens of its own, but the U.S. border pigs say they don't recognize state citizens. One may be a citizen of a state and yet not a citizen of the United States, but the U.S. border pigs say they don't recognize state citizens. There is a clear distinction between national citizenship and state citizenship, but the U.S. border pigs say they don't recognize state citizens. Instead, this provision protects only those rights peculiar to being a citizen of the federal government. It does not protect those rights which relate to state citizenship, but the U.S. border pigs say they don't recognize state citizens. Citizenship of the United States does not entitle citizens to privileged immunities as citizens of the state, since privileges of one are not the same as the other. But the U.S. border pigs say they don't recognize state citizens. They go ahead and assault you anyways. Such construction ignores the rights of the state in virtue of its sovereignty to confer citizenship within its own limits, where the rights incident to such a status are not of the citizenship mentioned in the federal constitution. It does not follow that because one has all the rights and privileges of a citizen of a state that he must be a citizen of the United States. Such as a distinction has long been recognized in this county, but the U.S. border pigs say they don't recognize state citizens. Merely being native born within the territorial boundaries of the United States of America does not make such an inhabitant a citizen of the United States subject to the jurisdiction of the 14th Amendment. But the U.S. border pigs say they don't recognize state citizens. There is in our political system a government of the several states and a government of the United States. Each is distinct from the other and has citizens of its own. But the U.S. border pigs don't recognize state citizens. The privileged immunities of citizens of the United States do not necessarily include all the rights protected by the first 8 amendments to the federal Constitution against the powers of the federal government. But the U.S. border pigs don't recognize state citizens because they want to assault you with their U.S. citizen slave. The only absolute and unqualified right of a U.S. citizen is to residence within the territorial boundaries of the United States. And that's why they want to assault you. The U.S. border pigs don't recognize state citizens, so they can assault you with their U.S. citizen slave. Civil rights under the 14th Amendment are for federal citizens and not state citizens. Federal citizens, as parents, have no right to the custody of their infant children except subject to the paramount right of the state. But the U.S. border pigs don't recognize state citizens, and that's what they say. The rights of the original judicial citizens of the states as such are not under the consideration of the 14th Amendment. They stand as they did before the 14th Amendment and are fully guaranteed by other provisions. But the U.S. border pigs say they don't recognize state citizens. The term citizen in the United States is analogous to the term subject in the common law. But the U.S. border pigs don't recognize state citizens, so they can assault you with their U.S. citizen slave. Therefore, U.S. citizens residing in one of the states of the Union are classified as property and franchises of the federal government as an individual entity. But the U.S. border pigs say they don't recognize state citizens. That's why they want to assault you with their U.S. citizen slave. A U.S. citizen, upon leaving the District of Columbia, becomes involved in interstate commerce as a resident, does not have the common law right to travel of a citizen of one of the several states. But the U.S. border pigs say they don't recognize state citizens. They want to assault you with their U.S. citizen slave. The U.S. border pigs know that they're only real authorities in commerce, which is why they say we don't recognize state citizens, so they can fabricate evidence of commercial activity because the U.S. citizens assessed a trust. This is Henry Boland's 1912, a summary. Every taxpayer's assessed a trust having sufficient interest in preventing abuse of the trust is to be recognized in the field of this court's prerogative jurisdiction. And this is a summary of the congressional record of June 13, 1967, 5 pages. A citizen of the United States is a civilly dead entity operating as co-trustee and co-beneficiary of the public charitable trust, the constructive cesticate trust under U.S. Inc. under the 14th Amendment, which upholds the debt of USA and U.S. Inc. But the U.S. border pigs say they don't recognize state citizens. And this is an act to establish a code of law for the District of Columbia in March 3rd, 1901. And at the very beginning, it says that the word person shall be held to apply to partnerships and corporations. And in section 1617 at 31 Stat 1432, it says that the legal estate to be in the cesticate use. And at section 252 at 31 Stat 1230, it talks about absence of 7 years, the presumption of death. So they assault you with their U.S. citizen cesticate trust is what they do. But the U.S. border pigs say they don't recognize state citizens. Statutes equals contract equals Roman cult. Did you give up your God-given rights for some satanic privileges? And this is Title 15, United States Code, Section 44, definitions. A corporation is deemed to include any company, trust, so-called Massachusetts Trust Association, or corporation, incorporated or unincorporated, which is organized to carry on business for its own profit or that of its members, and has shares of capital or capital stock or certificates of interest, and it has the same definition except it doesn't have shares of capital or capital stock or certificates of interest. And this is all coming from the Roman cult. Tomlin's Law Dictionary, 1835 edition, volume 2, under the definition of mort main. Yet still it was found difficult to set bounds to ecclesiastical ingenuity. That's the Roman cult, folks. For when they were driven out of all their former holes, they devised a new method of conveyance by which the lands were granted, not to themselves directly, but to nominal fiefs to the use of the religious houses, thus distinguishing between the possession and the use, and receiving the actual profits while the season of the land remained in the nomina fiefs, who was held by the courts of equity, then under the direction of the clergy. That's the Roman cult, folks, to be bound in conscience to account to assesticate use for the rents and emoluments of the estate. That's the taxes, the extortion, folks. And it is to these inventions that our practitioners are indebted for the introduction of uses and trusts, the foundation of modern conveyancing. When acting to enforce a statute and its subsequent amendments to the present date, the judge of municipal court is acting as an administrative officer and not in a judicial capacity. He's a bought and paid for clerk, and these border pigs, that's all they deal with is statutes. So you get a bought and paid for clerk masquerading as a judge from the border pigs. When acting to enforce a statute and its subsequent amendments to the present date, the judge of municipal court is acting as an administrative officer and not in a judicial capacity. Courts administrating or enforcing statutes do not act judicially, but merely ministerially. He's a bought and paid for clerk masquerading as a judge. That's the border pigs assault you with. Ministerial officers are incompetent to receive grants of judicial power from the legislature. Their acts in attempting to exercise such powers are necessarily nullities. It is the accepted rule, not only in state courts, but in the federal courts as well. But when a judge is enforcing administrative law, they're described as mere extensions of the administrative agency for superior reviewing purposes as a bought and paid for clerk. A judge ceases to sit as a judicial officer because the governing principles of administrative law provides that courts are prohibited from substituting their evidence, testimony, record, arguments, and rationale for that of the agency. Additionally, courts are prohibited from substituting their judgments for that of the agency. He's a bought and paid for clerk. Judges who become involved in enforcement of mere statutes, civil or criminal in nature, act as mere clerks for the involved agency. That's the border pigs. My blog, contact information, my blog is sovereigntyinternational.wordpress.com. My website is sovereigntyinternational.fyi. My email address is engineerwin@yahoo. My YouTube profile, Sovereign Living, is Sovereignty International. My Facebook community page, I deleted it due to censorship on the part of Facebook. And my private group at Facebook called Sovereignty International is being deleted. It takes time to ban 17,000 people off your group, and I'm not going to let Facebook profit from my hard work. My Yahoo private group is called Administrating Your Public Servants, and my Google private group is called Administrating Your Public Servants. Follow me on Twitter at Engineer Win. Follow me at bit.me. That's my profile there. I'm on Steemit at Sovereignty International on BitChute. But individuals, when acting as representatives of a collective group, cannot be said to be exercising their personal rights and duties, nor be entitled to their purely personal privileges. Rather, they assume the rights, duties, and privileges of the artificial entity or association for which they are agents, officers, or they are bound by its obligations. That's U.S. Supreme Court. That's why the U.S. border pigs want to assault you with their U.S. citizen slave so they can get you into one of their so-called contracts. Whenever the Uniform Commercial Code creates a presumption with respect to a fact or provide that a fact is presumed, the trier of fact must find the existence of the fact unless and until evidence is introduced that supports a finding of its non-existence. That's why the U.S. border pigs want to assault you with their U.S. citizen slaves so they can assault you with their Uniform Commercial Code and presume that you're one of their slaves. Did you give up your God-given rights for some satanic privileges? And in an action with respect to an instrument, the authenticity of an authority to make each signature on the instrument are admitted, unless specifically denied in the pleadings. That's why the U.S. border pigs want to assault you with their U.S. citizen slaves so they can forge your signature onto a contract and sell you into slavery and call it a contract. And unless you know that's what's going on, then it'll be all done and deal. And even if you do know what's going on, it's almost impossible to deal with it in their commercial jails because they don't even give you a pen and paper. That's the Texas Business and Commerce Code, the Uniform Commercial Code 3.308. And this is, again, Uniform Commercial Code. The following rules apply in a certificated security against the issuer unless specifically denied in the pleadings. Each signature on a certificated security is, or the necessary endorsement is admitted. So they forge your signature onto a contract, sell you into slavery, and then sell the securitize it and sell it on Wall Street. And so then their bankster thief buddies can make a bunch of money off it. And that's all the U.S. border pigs want to do. There are no common law offenses against the United States. Only those acts which Congress has forbidden with penalties for disobedience of its commands are crimes. Under Texas law, there is no act or omissions a crime unless made so by statute. Legislature may create an offense in the same enactment, provide exceptions to its application. This is exactly the same thing that went on with the War of Independence. Everything is an admiralty. A writ of error doth not lie upon a sentence in admiralty, but an appeal. Okay, so all appeals are in admiralty. That's that's Tomlin's Law Dictionary, 1835 edition, under the definition of admiralty, but it's citing Book 4 of the Institutes and the Laws of England by Coke in the 1500s. Appeals are an admiralty. That's why it's called a court of appeals. It's the same thing that precipitated the War of Independence. This is the causes and necessities for taking up arms, 1775. Statutes have been passed extending the courts of admiralty and vice admiralty far beyond their ancient limits for depriving us of the accustomed and inestimable privilege of trial by jury in cases affecting both life and property, to supersede the course of common law and instead thereof to publish and order the use and exercise of the law martial, and for altering fundamentally the form of government established by charter. We saw the misery to which such despotism would reduce us. While the founding fathers saw what was going on, but the people today are too stupid to figure it out. In the meantime, this is a book called The Non-Ratification of the 14th Amendment by Judge A.H. Ellett of the Utah Supreme Court in the case Diet versus Turner, and he says the same thing, but in a different way. In the meantime, civil law was the form of law imposed in the Roman Empire, which was largely, if not wholly, governed by martial law rule. Equity has always been understood to follow the law. To have superior equity is to turn things on their head. This is exactly what happens when martial law is imposed. If equity is the law, then it follows its own course rather than following common law, thereby destroying common law and leaving what's called equity in its place. This is a letter from the Georgia Department of Driver Services. It's actually quite a lengthy letter, 3 pages. There's a signature, Jennifer Ammons, General Counsel, but I've got it all here in this text right here. A statute creates a rebuttable presumption of residency for anyone who meets the following criteria. However, no such person shall be considered a resident for purposes of this chapter unless such person is either a U.S. citizen or an alien with legal authorization from the U.S. Immigration and Naturalization Service. So the U.S. border pigs want to assault you with their U.S. citizen so then they can get away with it. That's exactly what these pigs do. The Federal Tax Lien Act of 1966. The term motor vehicle, that's why they want extortion. They always want it in Federal Reserve notes. The federal term motor vehicle means a self-propelled vehicle which is registered for highway use under the laws of any state or foreign country. Security, and it talks about Federal Reserve notes, negotiable instruments, all falls under Roman law. International law rule, adopted for areas under federal legislative jurisdiction, federalizes state civil law, including common law. This rule serves to federalize not only the statutory but the common law of a state. State and federal venue discussed. The civil laws effective in an area of exclusive federal jurisdiction are federal law, notwithstanding their derivation from state laws. Actually, what that's saying is all state laws are actually federal. And a cause arising under such laws may be brought in or removed to a federal district court. And this is taken from jurisdictional or federal areas within the states. Report for the Interdepartmental Committee for the Study of Jurisdictional or Federal Areas within the States, Part 2, a text of the law of the legislative jurisdiction submitted to the Attorney General and transmitted to the President June 1957. And that's actually page 158 through 165 is taken from all 3 of those pages, or more than 3. Anyways, We therefore decline to overrule the opinion of Chief Justice Marshall. We hold that the District of Columbia is not a state within Article 3 of the Constitution. In other words, cases between citizens of the district and those of the states are not included in the catalog of controversies over which the Congress could give jurisdiction to the federal courts by virtue of Article 3. In other words, Congress has exclusive legislative jurisdiction over citizens of Washington District of Columbia, and through their plenary power nationally covers those citizens, even when in one of the several states, as though the district expands for the purpose of regulating its citizens wherever they go throughout the states of the Union. And so U.S. citizens get a military dictatorship admiralty court and it's not Article 3. And they do not get an Article 3 court. There's no Article 3 courts out there. None of these bail priests want to do it. A penal action is an action on a penal statute because they want to assault you with one of their contracts so they can collect a royalty. A penal action is an action on a penal statute, an action for recovery of penalty given by statute. Where an action is founded entirely upon a statute, the only object is to recover a penalty or forfeiture. Such action is a penal action. The words penal and penalty in their strict primary sense denote a punishment, whether corporal or pecuniary, imposed and enforced by the state for a crime or offense against its laws. The noun penalty is defined forfeiture to be forfeited for non-compliance with an agreement. Okay? And so they're assaulting you with one of their so-called contracts, tied into the Uniform Commercial Code again. A penal action is one founded entirely on statute and brought for the sole object of recovering a penalty or forfeiture imposed as punishment for a specific offense, while a remedial action is one brought to obtain compensation or indemnity. A penal action is a civil suit brought for the recovery of a statutory forfeiture when inflicted as punishment for an offense against the public. Such actions are civil actions, on the one hand closely related to criminal prosecutions, and on the other to actions for private injuries in which the party aggrieved may by statute recover punitive damages. Private injuries, punitive damages, okay? And so they are assaulting you with one of their so-called contracts. And their U.S. border pigs drag you into their kangaroo court. It's a kangaroo court as soon as you get there. They put barricades up on the roads, and you have to deal with the pigs. Kangaroo court is a term descriptive of a sham legal proceeding in which a person's rights are totally disregarded and which the result is a foregone conclusion because of the bias or court or other tribunal. A summary proceeding is another name for a star chamber that was abolished in England. And that's exactly what it is a star chamber. The corrupt star chamber courts of England require defendants to have counsel. Why do you think they want to assault you with one of their bar members? Because it admits jurisdiction of their kangaroo court. Star chamber stood for swiftness and arbitrary power. It was a limitation on the common law. That's a U.S. Supreme Court case. He, the prisoner, has, as a consequence of his slavery, not only forfeited his liberty, but all his personal rights, except those which the law affords and its humanity affords him. He is, for the time being, a slave of the state. That's why these Satanists want to get rid of their little common law problem by imposing martial law, because at common law, they'd be put to death. If a man be found stealing any of his brethren of the children of Israel, and maketh merchandise of him or selleth him, then that thief shall die. Thou shalt put evil away from among you. Check out my other videos: Bankster Thieves Playlist, Roman Cult Playlist, Bankrupt Corporate So-Called Governments, Bar Members 1 through 3, Do-It-Yourself, How Not to Volunteer for the Selective Service in the Draft, Martial Laws here, Do-It-Yourself No Income Tax, Do-It-Yourself Free Mail, Do-It-Yourself Kangaroo Courts 1 through 10, the Canada Border Pigs Playlist. A judge loses his absolute immunity from damage actions only when he acts in clear absence of all jurisdiction and performance of an act which is not judicial in nature. When enforcing mere statutes, judges of all courts do not act judicially and thus are not protected by qualified or limited immunity. Officers of the court have no immunity when violating a constitutional right, for they are deemed to know the law. An officer who acts in violation of the Constitution ceases to represent the government, okay? So these pigs don't represent the government. When there's no jurisdiction, there's no judge. The proceeding is as nothing. Such has been from the laws from the days of Marshall Saya. And that's citing Coke, okay? That's a U.S. federal court case citing a Supreme Court case which cites Coke. A void judgment is one which has no legal force or effect whatever. It is an absolute nullity. Its invalidity may be asserted by any person whose rights are affected at any time, at any place, and it need not be attacked directly, but may be attacked collaterally whenever and wherever it's interposed. A void order may be attacked either directly or collaterally at any time. A void judgment is one which from its inception is and forever continues to be absolutely null and without legal efficacy. These border pegs assault you with their void judgments, ineffectual to bind the parties to support a right of no legal force or effect whatever, and incapable of enforcement in any manner or to any degree. Not every action by any judge is an exercise of his judicial function. It is not a judicial function for a judge to commit an intentional tort, even though the tort occurs in the courtroom. When the judge acts as a trespasser of law, when the judge does not follow the law, the judge loses subject matter jurisdiction, and the judge's orders are void and no legal force or effect. Brodum fulmen, an empty noise, an empty threat, a judgment void upon its face, which is in legal effect no judgment of all, and by which no rights are divested, and from which none can be obtained, neither binds nor bars anyone. Two national governments exist, one to be maintained under the Constitution with all its restrictions, the other to be maintained by Congress outside and independent of that instrument. So the one that's out by Congress outside and independent of the Constitution means it's unconstitutional. These U.S. border pigs are nothing but a bunch of Roman cult Satanists. They're not representing the government, and they're nothing but a bunch of pigs. No one is bound to obey an unconstitutional law, and no court is bound to enforce it. An unconstitutional act is not law. It confers no rights, it imposes no duties, affords no protection, it creates no office, it is in legal contemplation, as inoperative as though it had never been passed. An unconstitutional law is void and is as no law. An offense created by it is not a crime. U.S. border pigs are a bunch of Satanist pigs, and they ought to be put to death. Okay, that's what needs to happen. Okay, they need to be put to death. Whoever, under color of any law, statute, ordinance, regulation, or custom, willfully subjects any inhabitant to any state, territory, commonwealth, possession, or district to the deprivation of any rights, privileges, or immunities secured or protected by the Constitution or laws of the United States shall be fined under this title or imprisoned. And so these border pigs are violating their own codes. But these Baal priest Satanist whores on the so-called judges refuse to do a damn thing about it. If two or more persons conspire to injure, oppress, threaten, intimidate any person in any state, territory, commonwealth, possession, or district in the free exercise or enjoyment of any right or privilege secured to him by the Constitution or laws of the United States, or because of his having so exercised the same, they shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 10 years or both. And so it's a conspiracy. Right from the top, from the Secretary of Homeland Security, that bitch, and all of their pigs, all the way down. They're conspiring together. They teach their border pigs to threaten, coerce, and intimidate people, and that's exactly what these pigs are doing. If two or more persons in any state or territory, any place subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, conspire to overthrow, put down, or destroy by force the government of the United States, or to levy war against them, or to oppose by force the authority thereof, or by force to prevent, hinder, or delay the execution of any law of the United States, or by force seize, take, or possess any property of the United States contrary to the authority thereof, they shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 20 years or both. And that's exactly what's going on. These fucking pigs are involved in a seditious conspiracy, and their fucking whores on the bench are doing exactly, they're helping them. U.S. border pigs are taught to perjure their oaths. An officer who acts in violation of the Constitution ceases to represent the government. A person commits a crime, and this is under Arizona statutes. A person commits criminal impersonation by assuming a false identity with the intent to defraud another. Okay, they're representing themselves as officers of the government, and they're not. They're pretending to represent some person or organization with the intent to defraud, pretending to be or assuming a false identity, employee or representative of some person or organization with the intent to induce another person to provide or allow access to property. A criminal impersonation is a class 6 felony. These U.S. border pigs are impersonating public servants under Texas law. A person commits an offense if he impersonates a public servant with intent to induce another to submit to his pretended official authority or to rely on his pretended official acts, or knowingly purports to exercise any function of a public servant or of a public office, including that of a judge or a court, and the position or office through which he purports to exercise a function or a public servant or public office has no lawful existence under the Constitution of this state or the United States. Well, their criminal corporation is unconstitutional, so it has no lawful existence, and they're nothing but a bunch of thieves and pigs. An offense under this section is a felony of the third degree. Whoever falsely assumes or pretends to be an officer or employee acting under authority of the United States or any department, agency, or officer thereof, and acts as such in any pretended character, demands or obtains any money, paper, document, or thing of value, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 3 years or both. Okay, the pigs in Congress don't want to put them in jail for too long. And so, again, the pigs at the border are nothing but a bunch of pigs, and they're foreign agents of the Roman cult and the UN, and they ought to be put to death. Okay, that's my opinion. Okay, they ought to be put to death. Anyways, thanks for watching my video. I'm preparing a criminal complaint, actually, but I doubt that that's going to do much good, because these pigs and they're bought and paid for whores, and the whores in the Department of so-called Justice don't want to do a damn thing about it. And so, I guess we'll see what happens. But I'm preparing a criminal complaint, and we'll see what happens with the pigs. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.